Chapter 10. The Next Murder. Monday morning, and Amber and Alan reported to the sheriff. "Sheriff, here we are." Sheriff Murdoch looked up and pointed to 2 chairs. "Sit." The sheriff smiled. "The community college over in Henry County has an introductory course in forensics. I want you both to go. I want you to see an academic counselor about starting in the spring. After that, I want you to get together with a young fellow over there who is just starting out as an architect, and between the 3 of you to design our CSI building." Amber looked at Alan. "Us? We don't know anything about being an architect." The sheriff answered, "You won't be architects, leave that to that young fellow. But you and Alan know how the Bureau CSI is set up. You will tell the architect what we want." 10-4? Alan and Amber replied, 10-4. The sheriff went on, "I called this young architect, he's expecting you this afternoon. Here is his card. The college counselor is expecting to see you about 10. Amber stood. "Well, partner, I guess we have our orders for the day. Let's go." They arrived at Henry County Community College, HCCC, about 9:30. They presented themselves to the receptionist and were directed to the counselor's office. The counselor introduced herself and commenced to see what courses they would need to take to complete the forensics course. First, she asked about their academic background. Amber gave her a quick rundown of her academics: pre-medical science and her doctorate in medicine, her board certifications in psychiatry and marriage counseling. The counselor's comment amounted to, "That's very impressive." She turned to Alan, "And you, Sergeant Smith?" He looked at Amber, his face turning red. Then he stood, "I'll be in the patrol car," and walked out of the counselor's office. The counselor was surprised. "What's wrong?" Amber replied, "He's very sensitive about his lack of education. He has a high school GED he received in the Marine Corps. His wife is also a doctor, and I have been his partner for the last 10 years. He is a very good, smart, hardworking man, but he has a very tough time in some things because he feels he's, well, as he put it to me once, I'm just a dumb cop, with a high school GED. I'm just a stupid jarhead." The counselor asked, "Corporal Clark, would you ask him to come back in? I think I can help." Amber went out to talk to Alan. Amber sat in the patrol car next to Alan. "Alan, the counselor asked me to ask you to come back in." Alan replied, I can't. Tears running down his face. "I'm going back and tell the sheriff to get someone else." She answered, "Alan, Sheriff Murdoch wants you, not someone else. He stuck his chin out, then I'll quit the force." She began to tear up. "Oh, Alan, partner, don't do this. You're a Marine, with the Medal of Honor. You've got the guts to stick this out. Please." He hung his head, shaking it from side to side. "That woman in there has a PhD, I saw it on her wall. She thinks I'm dumb." She talked back and forth for about 10 minutes. Then she walked back to the counselor's office. "He thinks you think he's dumb. He said that he would quit the force if the sheriff tries to force him to take these courses." The counselor said, "I've seen this before. Would you take me out to him?" Amber took the counselor out to the patrol car, and the counselor slid in beside Alan. "Sergeant Smith, I do not think you're dumb. So, you've got a high school GED. That tells me a couple of things about you." Alan glared at her. "What?" She quietly replied, "It tells me you have what it takes to take these courses. It tells me you have the initiative to further your education. It tells me you're not dumb. I have some college-level tests you could take to see what courses you need and what courses you could skip. They're kinda like college-level GED tests if you're willing to try." Alan, looking a little sheepish, "I guess I can only try." The counselor replied, "Good, I'll set you up to start testing. When? Next week?" He said, "Okay." The counselor said, "Now, if you two could bring me copies of your, Corporal Clark, your college transcripts, and Sergeant Smith, if you'll bring me a copy of your GED, we can get started." Then she walked back to her office. Amber slid in beside Alan. She put her arms around him and kissed him. "I know you'll ace those tests. I'm proud to be your partner." Alan smiled. "Well, let's find that architect's office." Amber and Alan made contact with the architect, and they began to work together to design the new CSI lab. Afterward, Amber called Susan. "Susan, I need to talk to you." Susan replied, "What about?" Amber asked, "Could you meet me at the truck stop? I want to tell you what happened today at the college." The two met at the truck stop for coffee and a donut and talked. Amber told Susan about the scene in the counselor's office and the subsequent events. "Susan, I believe Alan has an inferiority complex because of you and me. Susan's face reflected her concern and confusion. What did we do? Amber replied, we got an education, that's what we did. Let's face it, Susie, Alan loves us, but he has a problem dealing with the idea that he is, somehow lacking, because he only has a high school GED. Susan replied, after we got married, I talked to him about that. Did you know that his family was faltering because his father fell from the hayloft and could not do the hard labor to keep the farm earning enough, so he quit school and joined the army and sent most of his pay home to help the family? When his enlistment was up, he joined the Marines and went to Vietnam and sent most of his pay, including his combat pay, home to the family. Amber looked at Susan. Did Alan ever tell you what happened when he went home after being in Vietnam? Susan replied, about them throwing him off the property and disowning him? Amber replied, yeah. Susan said, he has had no contact with his family since. And I know that hurts. I do everything I can to let him know that he is loved and appreciated every day. Roger, naturally, does the same thing. Amber said, he has agreed to take the college-level equivalency tests. We need to encourage him any way we can. Susan lifted one eyebrow. We? Amber replied, yes, we. You, me, and Roger. After all, we are all with him many hours a day. Susan answered, okay, but it should include the sheriff, other deputies, all our friends. Amber replied, you're right, but I don't know what might happen to his ego if he thought everybody knew. This should remain strictly between you and me. Susan nodded her head in acknowledgement of the wisdom of her friend. Susan said, I guess we don't need to change anything, just be aware of Alan's insecurities and encourage him along the way. The Bureau sent out an all-points bulletin, APB, describing the suspect, Gerald Kramer. Every law enforcement officer in the state where Deborah Jean Lacey had lived wore a bright red strip of tape across their badge as a sign that they were actively engaged in capturing Kramer, alive. Deborah's family and friends all wore makeshift badges with the same red strip as a sign of grieving, honoring Deborah, praying that Kramer would be caught and incarcerated in the deepest hole in the strongest prison in the country for the rest of his life. Alan and Amber wore the red strip of tape on their badges, but their prayer was that they would be the ones to capture Kramer. Uncle Chet wore a red stripe on the employee badge in the lumberyard like the rest of Roger's family. All the children in Mountain View County and Lake County wore the makeshift badges with the red strip. 2. This red strip was a warning, do not go with strangers. That warning badge became a symbol for every school kid in the state, and the next state, where Debbie had lived. Alan and Amber continued to work with the architect to design Mountain View County's CSI lab. It was summer, and the kids were out of school. Roger and Teresa spent a lot of time together. Both kids had grown into very attractive young people. They would be starting junior high in the fall, but they continued to be the best of friends and vowed always to be best friends. Alan took a college-level examination every Wednesday. After taking 5 of the examinations, Alan and Amber were scheduled to begin their course in forensic science in the fall. Alan had done very well in the tests he had taken, completing all 5 with an average score of 98%. This seemed to bolster his confidence and help overcome his feeling of inadequacy. Of course, it didn't hurt that his partner, his wife, and his son were his loudest cheerleaders. When the testing was completed, Sheriff Murdoch called Alan into his office to congratulate him on successfully completing the tests with such a high percentage. Amber, I'm glad you're here. Alan, your test results are in. You have achieved a very high percentage overall, 98%. Congratulations, Sergeant Smith. I'm proud of you, son. High praise from the sheriff, indeed. Amber grabbed Alan and hugged him for all he was worth. Congratulations, partner. Susan and Roger will be so proud. I know I am. Susan and Roger stepped into the sheriff's office exclaiming, we are very proud of you, darling. Then Sheriff Murdoch shooed all of them out of his office. I have work to do, and so do you. It was early August when the sheriff called Amber and Alan to his office. I just got a call from Henry County Community College. You will start class Monday at 0800. Wear civvies. The county will reimburse you for driving expenses. I'm going to put you 2 on limited duty, say noon to 6. We still have a county to protect and serve. You had best get there about 0730. They replied, 10-4. Everyone in the department wore the red tape on their badge and were especially watchful to try and find Gerald Kramer. Alan and Amber were kind of bummed out because of the requirement to attend class and patrol. The patrol time being a short shift, and they wanted to be the ones who captured Kramer. The more time on duty, the better their chance of a collar. It was early Tuesday morning. Alan and Amber had just arrived at Henry County Community College, when Amber cried out, "Alan, look. Look, that sure looks like Kramer, don't you think?" They got out of the car and began to walk toward the man that Amber had pointed out. The man turned, looked at Alan and Amber and started to run. Alan and Amber ran toward the man in question, however, he jumped into a car and sped off. Alan read off the first 3 figures of the license plate, and Amber read off the last 3 figures. They ran into the college and asked to call the sheriff, Sheriff Kent. "This is Alan Smith, Mountain View County Deputy. My partner and I saw Gerald Kramer here at the college. He escaped in a tan Ford sedan. We have the first 3 numbers and the last 3 numbers off the license plate." The sheriff replied, "Give me the numbers, and I'll take it from here." Alan responded, "First 3, GHR. Then he handed the phone to Amber, "Last 3, 7, 6, 9. The sheriff told them, "Thanks. You get to class, and I'll put out an APB." "Thanks." They heard and understood the elation in Sheriff Kent's voice. They couldn't help but feel disappointed. They let him escape. Amber looked at Alan, "Well, partner, Kramer made us. Who knows how long he has been watching us? He knew who we are." Alan slammed his fist into his other hand. "I guess we'll never catch the guy." Amber replied, "Unless we can surprise him." They arrived at their class. "Professor Hendricks, we apologize. We saw a suspect in the college parking lot, but he escaped. We called Sheriff Kent and told him what we knew." The professor replied, "Being observant is the first prerequisite to being a good CSI. Please take your seats." Professor Hendricks looked up and began to speak. "We have an advantage over the police in the big cities. We know most of our citizens. We see them in the grocery store, the cafe, the hardware store, and on the streets. If someone were to tell us to look in on Bonnie at the Miller farm, we know just who that is and where that person just might be. So, if there is trouble, we might be able to detect it from the tone of their voice. Being observant is very important: sight, sound, even feelings. We might detect trouble from a voice on the phone, or body language, or just their appearance. Practice observing everything." The members of the class listened intently, nodding their heads, some somber, some smiling, some somewhere in between, but all agreeing with the professor's words. Professor Hendricks pointed at Amber, "Corporal Clark, what did you see?" Amber replied, "We have burned the suspect's picture into our brains. I saw a man across the parking lot that looked like our suspect. I pointed him out to my partner, and he agreed that the man looked like our suspect." The professor said, "Corporal Clark, what did you see?" Amber replied, "I saw a man. Brown hair, about 5'9", wearing a man's blue denim overalls, like a mechanic's overalls, and work boots. The man looked up directly at me and turned and started to run." The professor asked, "Could you see his eyes or any other details?" Amber thought a minute. "Yes. The only other thing I noticed was the lower part of his face was very light. The rest of his face seemed tanned." The professor turned to Alan, "Sergeant Smith, what did you see?" Alan thought, then replied, "Other than what Amber, Corporal Clark has already described, the suspect was originally walking toward one of the, what do you call the students' barracks?" The professor replied, "Student dorm?" Then Professor Hendricks said, "You see, class, we have a good general description of the subject. The possibility that he has recently shaved off a beard which he has worn for a considerable period of time, and the general direction he was walking. I believe that it is time to explore the possible destination to see if there is any evidence that he has been here before. Sergeant Smith, Corporal Clark, I will call the administration and get permission to examine the student dorm. I want you two to start planning our examination." Alan smiled, 10-4 sir. Later, as the class began to plan the examination, they asked, "Why would our suspect be going to the student dorm?" Alan thought and then spoke, "If this is our suspect, he is a murderer of a 10-year-old girl and a peeping Tom. He tried to peep on Amber, here, electronically. He may have set up a peep here in some cute little girl's room. We need to find out who lives in what rooms and inspect each one closely and check on the girl's latrine, restroom, and showers." The professor returned and informed the class that they had permission to inspect the dorm rooms. "Well, Sergeant Smith, Corporal Clark, what's the plan?" Alan replied, "We check each room for questionable or suspicious points in the rooms, something that doesn't look quite right. We will need flashlights, strong flashlights. We will also have to see if there are full-length mirrors that seem out of place. And we will need to check showers and toilet stalls. It's a long, tedious job, but we have to check everything. Oh, yes, we will have to check places where a camera might be placed out of normal sight, attic, broom closets, and stairwells. Professor Hendricks replied, "Good plan, Sergeant Smith." Well, anyone want out? No one wanted out. Everyone was eager to begin. The professor led the class to the girls' dorm and turned to Amber and asked, "Where should we start, Corporal Clark?" Amber responded, "We knock on each door and explain what we are doing and ask permission to make our inspection. To begin, let Alan check the room and show all of us what to look for." The professor knocked on the first door they came to. A young lady opened the door and asked what they wanted. Alan stepped to the door and explained, "We are inspecting each room because there is a possibility that you may be being spied upon." The young lady stepped back. "Okay, you can check. Sorry for the mess." Alan had a stepladder and grabbed his flashlight, and he stepped into the room. Using the ladder, he checked the ceiling near the beds. "Take a look, Professor, right there," as he shined his light on one particular spot on the ceiling. The professor turned and asked the room's occupant if it would be all right for everyone to examine the spot Alan had found. She agreed and stepped out of the room. Alan explained exactly what had drawn his attention to that spot. Everyone in the class examined the spot and asked questions or asked for clarification, and Professor Hendricks or Alan would answer their requests. Gathering in the hallway, one member of the class asked if the ladder was necessary. Alan replied, "It depends on your vision. I like to get up close and personal." The professor turned to the young lady, "Thank you, so much. We will be inspecting every room in this building. But, we will remove the camera from your ceiling right now." Then to Alan, "I'm going to inform the president of the college right now. See what you can do to remove that camera." Alan responded, 10-4. To the class, "Let's go upstairs to the spot right above this room." The class went upstairs and found the room directly above the one below. Alan knocked on the door, no answer. He tried the door, locked. He turned to Amber, "Amber, please call administration and find out who is assigned to this room." Amber called the administrative office while Alan, using his pocket knife, opened the door. Amber called out, "The student registered here as Jennifer Vansickle. They say that she disappeared from campus 2 weeks ago." Entering the room, they found the room in immaculate condition except for a large black plastic bag in one corner. Alan said, "Professor, I think we had better call Sheriff Kent." There was a phone in the dorm room, and so the professor called 911 and reported what they knew. The professor said that they had better close the door, wait outside, and tell Sheriff Kent everything they knew. We had better not contaminate the scene. Sheriff Kent and 2 deputies arrived in 10 minutes. Alan explained what they knew, suspected, and observed. Sheriff Kent said, "Alan, Amber, Jeff, you are the closest thing we have to a CSI. I am calling the coroner. When he arrives, I want you 3 to investigate our scene. I'll clear it with Sheriff Murdoch." Then the sheriff said, "Alan, Amber, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Solemnly swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America, the laws of our state in Henry County." Alan and Amber did as the sheriff asked and took the oath. The sheriff took 2 badges out of his pocket and pinned them on his 2 new officers. "This is just to make it official. I don't promise any pay, but you are now sheriff's deputies in Henry County. Oh, by the way, I have Sheriff Murdoch's okay to do this." Alan asked, "What about the professor?" Sheriff Kent replied, "Oh, he was deputized years ago. I'm going to call the State Bureau of Investigation. I think we will need their coroner's lab for this one." Then the coroner arrived, and then the 3, almost CSI agents and the coroner entered the room. Alan looked at the professor and pointed to one side of the room, then to Amber and the other side of the room. The professor stepped out and dismissed the class, but asked one student to go to the classroom and bring back his forensics kit. Alan and the coroner went to the plastic bag. As they approached the bag, they began to notice a very ripe foul odor. Amber called out, "Alan, all the windows are open. What do you think?" The professor replied, "It's to allow fresh air in to avoid the odor calling attention to this room." Alan and the coroner carefully opened the plastic bag only to find a second bag and a third. Then they discovered the body of a young lady, seemingly stuffed into the plastic bags. The coroner looked at Alan, "Now what?" Alan replied, "Call your crew, but wait until I can document the corpse. I have to get my camera. It will only take a couple of minutes. When your crew gets here, wear the rubber gloves and carefully remove the body. but don't touch anything else, especially the plastic bags." The coroner went to make the call. Alan went to get his camera. Amber and the professor waited for the student to return with the professor's kit. Amber and the professor began to examine the room's floor and walls. At the door, the professor began to dust for fingerprints. "Corporal Clark, I have some prints here, I'll lift them to check against our suspect." Amber replied, "Okay, but Professor, my name is Amber, and Sergeant Smith is Alan, especially now that we are making up a team." The professor answered, "Okay, my name is Jeff." About that time, Sheriff Kent returned with his 2 deputies. Jeff said, "Sheriff, we are going to have to print all the occupants of this building just to eliminate anyone who might have inadvertently touched this room." The sheriff directed his deputies to begin collecting the prints. Alan walked in and began to photograph the body, bags, and area around the victim. Alan carefully documented the time, place, conditions, temperature, and the fact that the windows were all open. After about 2 hours, the Bureau CSI team arrived. Alan, Amber, and Jeff briefed the CSI team on what had happened since Amber had spotted the suspect. The hidden camera in the room below, entering the crime scene, fingerprinting the students, dusting and lifting the prints on the door and other places, opening the plastic bags and discovering the victim, the photographs that had been taken, and the fact that the county coroner had taken the victim's body to the State Bureau lab. Captain Stevens lifted one eyebrow. "Are you now CSI agents? And why are you 2 here in Henry County?" Alan answered, "We're attending Professor Hendrick's class in forensics." "Well, the professor set us to investigate what seemed to be our suspect's destination when we spotted him." Captain Stevens, Doug, and June looked at everything that had been done. Captain Stevens asked Sheriff Kent to continue to collect the students' fingerprints and to mail him a copy and continue to inspect the dorm rooms for more hidden devices. Then he asked if Alan and Amber could go to the Bureau lab to be part of the investigation. Amber replied, "We'll go talk to Sheriff Murdoch, pack our bags, kiss our families and drive there, okay?" The Bureau team left. Amber and Alan took their leave of Sheriff Kent and their professor and drove back home. Alan and Amber drove to the Capitol, got their hotel rooms, and reported to the CSI lab. Captain Stevens motioned to them as they walked in. "They're back in the morgue." Alan and Amber hurried back and greeted Dr. Teller, Doug, and June. Alan asked, "Where are we now?" Dr. Teller answered, "The autopsy is complete." Amber asked, "What's the COD, cause of death?" June answered, "She was strangled, but not before being drugged, raped, and tortured. Duct tape was used to gag and bind her hands and arms." Amber started to stagger. Alan and Doug helped her to sit. June asked, "Amber, are you okay? What's wrong?" Alan answered, "When she was in grade school, her friends tried to rape her. It's not the body, it's the vision of deliberate violence and rape that triggers this reaction. Otherwise, she is stainless steel. Doc, we've seen this before." Amber stood up. "Okay, I'm okay. I can continue with the investigation, now." Alan turned to Doug. "Anything from the prints in her room?" Doug replied, "Well, only one thing. There are prints from Gerald Kramer, some from the victim, and the rest we've identified several of her dorm mates." Alan asked June, "Anything else?" June replied, "No, nothing." Captain Stevens came into the lab. "We know who our suspect is, but we need to find out where he is. Sergeant Smith, you and Corporal Clark might as well go home. Sorry, we just can't seem to pin him down." Alan and Amber chatted with the doctor and the CSI agents a little, then left for home. The next day saw them in class again, then on patrol. When Alan and Amber completed their patrol, they went to their homes and spent a quiet night with their families. The next morning Alan and Amber returned to class. The professor smiled as they arrived in class with 5 minutes to spare. He looked at them and asked, "What progress have we made?" Amber shrugged her shoulders. "We know who our suspect is, but we have no clues as to where he is." "What about the rest of the dorm rooms?" The professor replied, "Sheriff Kent had his deputies inspect every room. That first room was the only room bugged. They went back to the room on the second floor and discovered the peeping devices. The hole in the ceiling was filled in with cement, and the rest of the dorm is okay." Construction began on the new CSI building. Sheriff Murdoch set in place a number of security measures to ensure that the building would be protected from any unauthorized niches or surveillance devices. Each construction worker was screened. The construction was done within a 10-foot high chain link fence with razor wire coils on top. During the hours of construction, a deputy was detailed to guard the entrance, check each individual coming and going during the hours of work, open and close gates, inspect cargo loads in and out of the facility. The guard was not to leave the gate under any circumstances without his being relieved by another officer. As the sheriff said, "I'm not paranoid. But I am a realist. Our CSI lab will be secure, a safe place to work." The guard station had a phone and a radio. If the guard needed to answer the call of nature, he would first call for a replacement. The guard was on duty for 3 hours and then relieved. Alan and Amber took their turn guarding the construction site. Even Sheriff Murdoch took a turn at the guard post. While on duty, the guard was permitted to take calls from friends and families, ensuring that the guard duty took precedence. While on guard duty, Alan received a strange phone call that went something like this. "Alan, hello, construction guard station." Caller, "Hello, Mabel, this is Regina, I'm sorry, but I can't meet you at the cafe this afternoon." Alan, "Regina, this is Deputy Smith." Caller, "Yes, I know. I just thought you should know that I'm stuck here at home, you know, kids and all." Alan, "Regina, are you in trouble?" Caller, "Why yes, I am. But I'll see you, say Wednesday, at the cafe?" Alan, "I'm on my way." Caller, "Goodbye." Alan grabbed the radio mic, then stopped and called the sheriff on the phone. "Sheriff, Alan. I just got a call from Regina Calford. I think she's in trouble." Sheriff, "I'm on my way down. Call Amber to pick you up. You two check it out. Keep me informed." Alan, 10-4. Alan on the radio, Unit MV04, this Unit MV03. Need immediate relief. 10:33, emergency. Amber's voice, 10-4. Amber pulled up in her patrol car about the same time the sheriff arrived to relieve Alan. Alan slid into the patrol car, Calford Farm, lights only. Top speed.